Hello, chess friends. Welcome back to our YouTube channel. So, as you all know, there is this Fide World Blitz Championship going on, and there's a lot of action going on. This is full of brilliancies. There are many beautiful, brilliant games, positional masterpieces played, tactical masterpieces played, and blunders are obviously happening even with the top 10. And obviously, the top 10 players are struggling against this other grandmasters who have a lifetime opportunity to play against this and defeat them, and they are taking their chances. But of course, all the action is not just happening in the men's section, in the open section. A lot of action is also happening in the women's section. So the FIDE Blitz Women Championship. This in this game, we are going to have a look at the Indian lioness Koneru Humpy versus Goryachkina. This is a very intense game, but of course, it all comes down to judgment. Who is better in this kind of position? I think in this kind of position, Koneru's judgment, Koneru's experience turned out to be on the top. It is just perfect. So let's look at this beautiful game. It seems like it was a very elegant, simple game. It was very simply won by Koneru. So let's see. D4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5. It's the typical opening Queen's Gambit. Nothing out of the blue. E3, b6, b3. All you just want to develop your bishops. Bishop d6, bishop d3, castles. This were easily blitz out. Bishop b7, bishop b2, knight bd7, knight bd2, knight e4. Now obviously you don't really want to capture this piece, right? Because if you take obviously with the knight, that's horrible because of this fork. It instantly loses, and something like bishop takes is equally bad because this knight has to move, and the moment your knight moves, for example, it can go in the center, it can also come down. Let's say it comes over here. The problem is, of course, this is a beautiful bishop. The queen can easily come in, and he has ideas like f5, rook f6, rook h6. He has ideas like rook f6, rook h6. Tremendous attacking possibilities for black. Obviously, you don't want to capture the knight on e4. So, Koneru very simply played queen to e2. Not capturing, just keeping the tension in the position. Now we have f5, again a very aggressive and strong move by black. There are several ideas, of course. The idea is you want to play queen here, and the main theme is, of course, to make a rook lift. Rook f6, rook g6, or rook h6, depending on the position, is a very good idea. At the same time, it protects the knight. But of course, there are some downsides to it. And you can only exploit the downsides if you're very alert. The downsides are you're overstretching your pawns, and these pawns might become vulnerable and weak. Now, of course, it's not up to everyone. I think everyone can't exploit this kind of slight weaknesses, but world-class players like Koneru Humpy are obviously alert about these things. So let's see what happens next. Rook ft1. We have queen f6 now. Rook ac1. Just centralizing. This is a nice position of centralization. Here you have g5, clearly showing black's intention. Black just wants to create a very strong attack, and of course, ideas can include something like, king h8, rook g8. Putting the rook on the g file is very good. Obviously, g4 is coming. If you have played g5, you're going to play g4. If you say a, you're going to say b. That's natural. There is a lot of attacking potential, and the moment this knight moves, then obviously bishop takes h2, queen h6. There are all kind of ideas that just pops up in this position, and although the bishop looks quiet over here, he might capture and open up at some point, and that bishop might become a decisive attacking piece. So it seems that white has to be very alert, but this is where the experience of a player really counts. Whenever there's an attack on one of the wings, you have to react on the other side, or more principally in the center. That's exactly what Humpy did. She captured the d5 pawn. Reaction in the center. Now that's really the best way to play against such a wing attack. E takes, and now we have bishop to a6. So what's the point behind this? She realizes that she has to stir the game onto the other side of the board in order to slow down the black counter attack. By the way, now the bishop looks really bad, but there's a particular idea behind it. The bishop is actually defending the pawn on d5. Without the bishop, that pawn will become weak. And of course, the bishop at the moment might look very weak, but as we have discussed, in the future, this bishop might have some great attacking prospects. So bishop a6 is a very simple and nice move. And of course, she has calculated a lot of moves over here. After all the exchange, she's gonna come out with more activity. So here we go. Bishop takes, queen takes, g4. And this is where she played knight to e5. Everything was well calculated. She calculated that at the end she's gonna come out on the top. So here we go. Knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes. And after all these exchanges, takes, even the knight went off. Black is a pawn up, but is that a stable pawn? In fact, it turns out it's not. Queen c4 check, and that is basically a double attack. Of course, the c7 pawn is hanging. King h8 was played in the game. But let me just show you what happens if rook f7, keeping tight the pawn, not giving up the pawn. In fact, after this, white gets some pressure in the position. White can play moves like, rook to d5. Now, the threat is, for example, you can't really go to e6 because of this simple tactic, discovered attack, check and win the queen. So you have to move to somewhere like f6. Of course, other moves like queen g7 also lose because of this move. So yeah, black has to be accurate here, and I think something like rook d7, attacking this guy. If you go rook f8, I'll just take the pawn. So maybe you have to play c5, but then just this. And basically, white gets a lot of nice activity. Obviously, this move is also going to happen. g3 just makes room for the king. And you can see white has excellent compensation for the pawn. And the moment white wants, white can always take back the pawn. Just take on a7 and that's it. It's very simple. So excellent play for the pawn. That's why this was not played by black. Black realized, okay, I'll give you back the pawn, but at least you don't get such a dangerous initiative. So king goes back. Now queen c7, rook c7. So let's take a pause and understand exactly what's happening in the position. Who has benefited from all of this trade? Well, I think it's totally white if someone has, because where is black's attack? Black's so powerful, promising attack after this move. Here at this point, let me just show you. At this point, you can see it felt like black is going to get a very strong attack, but till the point we reach at this point, where's the attack? The attack's gone. So definitely white has unraveled. At the same time, white has more active pieces. This rook is pretty dangerous, and of course the threat is to play rook 1 to d7 with the idea of rook h7, rook a7, grabbing more pawns. And now it turns out that, black has overstretched because of being ambitious. These pawns are overstretched, they are weak. f5 pawn is a natural target, a7 is a target, h7 is a target. So this might be very dangerous. Black has to pull the brakes. She has to unfortunately play the move rook to d8. Of course, now this gives white a slight edge. Takes, g3. Simply taking care of the back rank, making sure that everything is well protected. Now, target over here. If you push this, this becomes a target. This is a target. So many weaknesses. This king is very badly placed, very weak. And of course, the most important thing in this kind of position is getting a queenside majority. As we have seen from several games, queenside majority is really the key in order to win this kind of endgames. So, if white successfully gets either of the pawn, she's going to have more winning chances. So, a5 played by black. Koneru now plays rook to c6, an excellent move. If you just play rook b7 attacking the pawn, that's a simple move, but then rook d6, everything will be well defended. That's why rook c6 is a much stronger, much powerful, much flexible move. Idea is obviously to protect. At the same time, if you defend with rook b8, which is very passive, then rook to f6 will drop the pawn on f5. So that is pretty difficult. And of course, pushing the pawn forward doesn't make sense at all, because then after the rook c5, everything is a toast. This pawn, and this pawn. Black is going to be down a pawn, and that is a healthy pawn for white. So of course, black has to play actively. I think it's one of the main ideas in playing the rook endgames. You have to go for activity. Even if you are a pawn down, you can defend, but you have to choose activity. Of course, the problem for black is not just that. The problem is, of course, this overstretched pawn. If this pawn drops, this becomes weak, this becomes weak. So I think Koneru's judgment has proved to be really useful, and she has got it into a really good endgame. So king g2, king comes out, now takes the pawn. White is finally a pawn up. Activity has finally gained her the pawn. One advantage of chess, quality of pieces activity, has transformed into a material advantage. So here we go. Rook d2 attacks the pawn. a4. You don't really need to give up the pawn. Of course, there were better moves, but just a4. Simple chess. Rook to b2. Now, king f1. It's like teasing the opponent. What are you gonna do here? h5 was played. King g2. What's your plan? What's you're gonna do? Because I'm gonna simply play moves like rook a6 or even better rook b5, attacking both the pawns. Right now, your king can't step forward. If your f5 pawn drops, this guy will be hanging. This weak pawn becomes weak. It's a terrible position. Um, and of course, if I get the a pawn, then of course my a pawn becomes a passer. I'll have this position in the end with rook on a8, pawn on a7, and after that I'll move my rook to some square where I'll be able to get one of these pawns. Basically, it's a pure matter of technique, and I don't think a world-class player like Koneru Humpy will have any trouble winning this. So basically, this is where the game ended after the move king to g2. White won the game. Black respectfully either resigned, I think she did resign, or lost on time. I was not really, I don't think they're featuring the Women World Championship so much. All the focus is on the open part. That's where the sparkling games are. But of course, these games are really interesting. And the way Vaishali has been playing, it's also pretty applaudable. So yeah, let's look at this section as well. A lot of can happen, and well, we'll see. So this was an excellent game. I think it shows us about the judgment of a player. Whenever there's an attack on the one of the wings, you have to react in the center. That's one of the things. Another thing that you can learn from this game is going for activity, going for slight edges. The moment White had the rook on the c7 square, it was nearly decided that White will have an edge, and the rest everything was just a technique which was beautifully managed by Koneru Humpy. So what a great game by Koneru. Let's see today they are gonna play. I think the games have already started while I record this. So until next time. See you guys.